What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Honda Civic winter build. So, had to flip my head around because I had my head up in the wheel well there for a second. So, you watched the last video and you saw as we installed replacements for our worn control arms that were frozen from rust and other road debris, as well as salt and snow of Chicago driving. So, anyway, the Megan installed on this side, complete, okay? Left it loose, and here's why. We're also doing coilovers. Now, these coilovers are relatively new within the last few months, so they're still in decent shape. Just got a little bit of road debris and dust and whatnot on them from the summer driving. But upon installation and test driving, I did not like the fact that they were too bouncy. So this is another area that you have to figure out what you want. And I know that I used to have dampeners on here to control that bounce that you feel when you're going over road bumps and other things, potholes, etc., as well as maybe perhaps over a curb, or a speed bump. But anyway, these are not getting the job done. These were a very cheap set. It was like 250 bucks on eBay. Not very good. But I did it just for the time being because the other ones were presenting problems and leaking. So this one is made by a company called Rev9, which I've used in the past, and they're about $450 to $500. Not a very expensive coilover set. However, you get pretty good quality for the buck, bang for the buck. These have a little bit more travel, more adjustability, and some things to look for. Dampening control, so you can go ahead and adjust the dampening to make it bounce more or more stiff, a little more play, less play, etc. So, what are some of the things that you can encounter when doing a coilover swap? Well, it's a good thing that I have them out now because I'm going to show you the bottom ends of these coils. One uses a bolt that goes straight through with a nut on the other end, and that will go through your lower control arm that you'll see there in the gold, and you can tighten it up. However, when you take it out, some control arms have a nut welded in. Now you can go ahead and you can chisel that off if you want, break it off, but I don't recommend doing that because, as you can see, this is powder coated and you don't want to expose the metal to the elements, which could cause premature rusting, and with it, make your parts that you just spent all your money on look like garbage instead of looking like the nice, beautiful pieces that they come from the manufacturers. So with that being said, I'll probably have to run to the bolt shop, or sometimes Menards will have them, or even O'Reilly's, to go ahead and get the proper thread to fit this nut. So I'll end up taking the whole bottom of this piece off to take it with me so I can make sure it clears, etc. Some of the things to consider in the hat. You can see the hat, this is a portion of the top of this coilover, that it's a little bit thinner. And that's because this hat is steel, whereas this hat is aluminum or aluminum. You also know that the bushings are a little different. I have more bushing on this one as opposed to this, which is very weak looking. Also, something to consider is the bolts that go into your shock tower or strut tower. Because this is an aluminum or aluminum, depending on where you're from, hat, they are prone to stripping out easier under torque. Also, I had that happen to the front right side on the previous set, and yeah, you have to use a nut splitter to get that out, and we'll talk about that on another video. But anyway, these are prone to corrosion, and they go ahead and they strip out very easily because the metal is a lot, softer than the steel. So that's something you have to look out for. Also, if you wanted to adjust these in any way, there's really not much other than you can raise them or lower them up a little bit, and you can try and adjust these to push them down, but you get less travel, and honestly, they're not a very adjustable set. They're not a very accommodating set, and everything is honestly kind of cheaply made. So you get what you pay for, that's for sure, in anything automotive. So it's best to always stick to a company that you know. As discussed with the Megan upper camber arms, you're going to get what you pay for with a company that's been in the game for a couple decades and whatnot, and Megan has definitely made their name, as well as our Rev coilovers here. Our Rev coilovers, I've used Rev 9 before, and they're very well put together. Also, these steel hats have the grooves in there for these mounting studs, and they are less prone to stripping out. So as long as you go ahead and you put a nice little bit of a bead of sealant on the bottom there, water will not get in there, and you can even put a little bit on the outside for that added protection right up under there if you wanted to. I just put a little dab of clear to go across it so it keeps splashes and water and things out of there. And then also on the top end here, I would remove this nut like so. Let me back it off. And we'll talk about mounting these and what you should do on the inside as well, which will make things a lot easier to get out on the removal for the next servicing or replacement. So I went ahead and removed that nut, and as you can see, it's kind of tough to see in this video, but you might be able to see. Let me see if I can get a little closer. You can see some of the grooves in there. You do not want water getting in there. So once the water gets in there or moisture gets in there, it just plays all hell with corrosion, and the next thing you know, you got things stripping out. It's just not worth it. So my advice to you is either put some silicone in there and just use a Q-tip to push it down in there and then wipe it dry. Or if you really wanted to, you can just put a little bit of epoxy in there. A little bit of epoxy will also, but you make sure you wipe it off beforehand and don't get any on the threads because it'll cause a problem. So, but if you put epoxy down in there, that'll keep the water from getting in as well. But honestly, silicone's the way to go. Or if you really want to go with just a little bit of Permatex anti-seize, you can squish it down in there, and that'll also keep some of the moisture from getting in there. However, silicone is definitely the way to go. And then you can clean it up afterwards and clean the threads. So now that we know what to look for, we inspect the component to make sure everything's good to go. You want to make sure you preload these before you install them, and preloading is adjusting this the two rings down below here to make sure that there's no looseness in the coil, and to make sure that the compression is just barely beginning to start. You have just enough compression on there to keep things nice and tight, and then you go ahead and you tighten this back up, and you don't have any issues with rattling or anything like that. So when you install these coilovers, you're going to want to go ahead and anti-seize the top. Now you can do this once the coil is in. However, I think that putting the Permatex anti-seize on there beforehand is better, so that way you can get all the way down and around, and you don't have to worry about the metal conducting any moisture transference, and then you don't have to worry about the rust. Also, you definitely want to put some on the inside for this nut here, and you can even put a nice little bit, probably about an inch above where your coil is adjusting to. That way you don't have to worry about the rust seizing everything up. I would do that, remove this hat, put it to right around where you want it to be, go ahead and anti-seize it up, and then put it back up. And remember, you can always wipe this down and clean it up afterwards. But once that anti-seize is in those grooves and in those threads, you're good to go. Once you go ahead and you do all that, you go ahead and you remove your nuts like so, and you get ready to put it up into the shock tower or the strut tower. And it's very easy on the back end. Front's a little more work, but honestly, it goes in just like that. Just like so, and then you'll go ahead and you'll bring up that gold lower control arm, mount everything up, and then leave it nice and loose so that way you can finish up. Now today we're doing the upper control arms, the toe, and the coilovers. The lower control arms are brand new, as well as our bushing here on the rear trailing arms, so we don't have to worry about that. These Hondas are very easy, guys. Once you go ahead and you loosen, you put everything in there, you leave it all nice and loose, you can go ahead and install the rest of your components, and then it'll be easy to tighten everything down. So I hope that gives you a better understanding of coilovers and what to look for when you're shopping. Remember, knowing your market is absolutely pivotal, and checking dimensions on everything. Check, check, double check. If you're not sure, break out the micrometer, check the distances, check the width, check the distance down here if you need to verify that everything works out. And that's how you're gonna have a trouble-free installation, as well as trouble-free movement when you're on the track or on the streets. Anyway, please leave me some notes. If you like, smash that subscribe button. Follow us on Instagram and YouTube. Remember, dream it, build it, drive it, so I can see you on the road.